All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. We are doing our Facebook Live today with the designer of our Rigid Heddle Skill Builder Box 3 and our director of content, Christine Jablonski. So we're set to start at noon. I am going to give everyone a minute just to get on and make sure we get up and rolling here. Hi, Mary. Thanks for joining us today. Looks like Christine is here, so I'm going to get Christine in here. Then we will just wait for Deborah, and we will get rolling. Hello,
Hi.
Christine.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can. Yay.
Okay, excellent. How are you today?
I am good. The weather finally broke here. It's not disgustingly hot and humid.
Yes, same here. It's like actually quite lovely. It's like low 70s and great.
Fall, I think, is the best time of year. It's like such a weaving season.
Yes, it is. Hi, Mary. Mary, where are you joining us from? Let us know in the comments. Oh, we have a Mary and we have a Marie. I love it. Hello, welcome. So for everyone just joining, we're just waiting for Deborah Jarchow to join us today before we dive into the conversation. We're just going to give it a minute. We wanted to make sure there was time for us all to get settled. Oh, hi, Deborah. Looks like you have just popped on. So I'm going to invite you in to join us, Deborah. Just sent you a request, so hopefully you see a little request to join us here. Minnesota. Mary's in Minnesota. Okay, very nice. I'm also in the Midwest, so maybe we're having similar weather there. Deborah, are you seeing a request to join us perchance? It says it's adding you.
My car in Michigan.
Wow, car in Michigan. I'm in Michigan as well. Look at us, a real Midwest.
Midwest is representing today.
Yes, the Midwest is represented. I love it. Let's see. Okay, Deborah, it looks like it didn't have a response from you, so I'm going to send a request one more time. And let's see. All right, it says I'm adding you again, Deborah. Let's see if
There she is.
I'm finally on. It was telling me that I needed to say my camera would work, and I was having a little issue with that. So,
well,
hi.
perfect. I mean, you're here now. We made it a minute before our scheduled start time, so we're still well in the clear.
Excellent.
Perfect.
Another
Cool.
Michigan.
And yeah, there we go.
Wow.
Love it. Weavers of Michigan are showing up today. Cool. Well, I will just kick things off and get us going before I turn the conversation over to Christine and Deborah. So welcome to anyone that's watching live or watching the recording of our Facebook Live for the GIST Rigid Heddle Skill Builder subscription box. I'm Anna. I'm the customer service and marketing coordinator, and I'm just kicking things off today before we pass it over to Christine Jablonski, our director of content and customer experience. And of course, our guest of honor, our designer of the third box, which focuses on pickup stick lace table linens, Deborah Jarchow. So thank you both for being here today. If you've been in the Skill Builder Facebook group, you've probably seen some fun activity in there. We love seeing you guys sharing photos and asking each other questions, answering questions for each other. It's really great. So thank you all for your participation in that. And the purpose of our live today is to just give you, as Skill Builder participants, an opportunity to interact a little more directly with Deborah and to hear more information about her experience with weaving, what inspired this box, all of that kind of fun stuff, what she learned while designing these projects, et cetera, et cetera. So before we get started, just a couple of logistic housekeeping things. The way this will work today is that you can submit any questions or conversations for discussion that you would like into the comments, and I will be monitoring those. So Christine and Deborah will be having their conversation, but if you submit something for comment or for discussion, I will pop it into the conversation so they know that has been asked. And then we would love to keep the conversation focused around the actual skill builder materials. So if you have other questions or really technical questions about the patterns, please email us at hello@gistyarn.com. We want to make sure that we give those type of questions our full effort in getting them answered correctly and promptly. So if you have technical questions, direct those to our email. We'll take those there. This is going to be a more general and open conversation about weaving and inspiration, et cetera, et cetera. So now I will turn things over to Christine.
Okay. Thanks, Anna, and welcome, Deborah. Nice to see you again.
Nice to see you
Hope you
too.
had a good weekend. We tried this on Friday, it didn't quite work, so I'm glad things are on track today.
Me too.
This is one of these incredible sort of full circle moments for me because, Deborah, as you and I've talked about, you're the one who taught me to weave. And any of you out there in Facebook land, if you have ever emailed with me or if we've spoken on the phone about rigid Heddle teachers and where should I learn, I've always recommended Deborah's Craftsy class online, the Rigid Heddle Skill Builder Library course that she does, because she's just such a wonderful teacher. And what's so funny is that I think had I not taken that class, I don't think I would have ended up here
Wow.
with like these incredible colleagues and amazing customers and just fabulous designers to work with. So it's just one of those like beautiful kismet things. And so it's I'm just so glad that you were excited about doing this box with us. And let's see, so I guess just sort of a recap maybe on your weaving journey and how you got here.
Okay. Well, first of all, it always makes me proud that you're someone that I taught to weave, because look at how successful you are with weaving and it's become your career. And I mean, what more gratification as a teacher of weaving could I have than to see people that fall in love with it and continue, and it becomes part of their life. I mean, that's like my hope for so many people, because it's such a soothing, peaceful kind of thing to do, that I just am really happy that it seems to be having a resurgence, and especially with rigid Heddle weaving. So I was always a knitter, crocheter, fiber, embroidery kind of person growing up, and and I always wanted to learn to weave. But when I would look at books about learning how, this was way before Craftsy or anything like that. When I would look at books on learning how to weave, I would be overwhelmed by the amount of equipment that I needed to purchase, and just reading, it wasn't clear to me how I would go about doing it. And gosh, I think it must have been 35 or more years ago. I lived in California and I went to a craft show. That I lived way on the northwest side of LA, and I went to a craft show that was very far east of LA. It was about, I don't know, an hour and a half drive. And there were these two ladies there that had a booth at the craft show, and one was weaving and one was spinning. They had their loom and their spinning wheel with them. And I kind of glommed onto them like, a fangirl. I was like, oh, I couldn't leave their booth. I just kept talking to them. I'm sure I was annoying. And finally, I asked him, do you have any idea if I could learn how to weave? And the one lady said, well, I teach weaving, but I live really far from here. And it turned out she lived 10 minutes from me, which was just such kismet. And so I took like 4 lessons from her, just enough to get me started. And so that I knew I could get like a table loom. I didn't have to buy a big floor loom. And there was a guild, and I could rent a loom from the guild to learn how to weave. And well, that was the beginning. I mean, once I started, it became my full-time passion.
So
And it still is.
it's like one person started that spark, right?
Yes, exactly. And, I mean, I can only hope that I do that for other people, that by teaching weaving, that other people can get that. And I mean, just like you, weaving it's my job. It's my hobby. My husband says to me, when are you going to retire and stop teaching all the time? And it's like, but I don't want to because that's what I like doing.
Right. Right.
So anyway,
Now, actually, speaking of your husband, I think during one of our very first classes, when you were introducing yourself and talking about your background, you had mentioned that you had sold all of your dining room furniture in order to make room for looms.
yes.
Was that right? Am I remembering that right?
Yes, you do. And
So,
so we had this house that had a big living room and dining room, and there was a giant archway in between the two rooms. And so, yeah, I mean, I got one loom and then I got another, and we never used our dining room anyway. It was a formal dining room, and we always ate in the breakfast area. We had a table in the kitchen, and I don't think we ever used our dining room a single time. We lived in that house for 30 years. Okay. And so, yeah, we don't need the table. Let's get rid of it. I want a different one anyway if we were going to have a dining room table. So, yeah, we got rid of all the furniture. And I think I had 4 looms in there at one time. And the living room I used as my yarn storage area. It still had a couch in it, but I think I had put all the yarn in front of the fireplace because we had 3 fireplaces in the house. We didn't need that one, right? So,
right, right.
anyway, so yeah. And he was very tolerant of that. But then at some point, it got a little bit overwhelming for him. And a friend of mine had a studio at an art center. And he said, Jerry's studio, wouldn't you like to have a studio like that? And I was like, sure. So then I moved everything to the studio, and I was there for 15 years or longer. I had a studio there.
And so those sounded like those were big looms. Those are floor looms because you were weaving also like I think liturgical cloths or altar cloths. Is that correct?
I wove garments, and I also wove liturgical things. Actually, I also wove things for exhibit, and I had woven these big giant panels for an exhibit in the art center where I had my studio.
Mhm.
I mean, I think the biggest one was 27 feet long. It was a 3 panel set, giant. The gallery had a peaked ceiling, and I wanted a piece that would hang from the peak in the ceiling all the way down and puddle on the floor.
Oh,
So
beautiful.
that was the center panel, and then there were medium and shorter panel on either side of it. And interestingly enough, I didn't see this. Somebody else at the center did. The gardener was walking through to cut from the back of the studio to the front, and he walked through the gallery, and he stopped when he saw that, and he knelt down and genuflected.
Oh, wow.
It touched him, and someone witnessed that, and then that someone that saw that, their church had decided to commission someone to do panels for behind their altar. And she saw it, and she suggested to the committee that they get in touch with me. And so they did, and we worked out a deal, and I wove panels for the church. I ended up weaving 4 sets of panels for them. It was a Catholic church, and they have 4 distinct color seasons in their liturgical calendar. And so I wove 4 for them. And then, word gets around between the liturgical designers for different churches. And I ended up doing, I don't know, 6 or 7 different churches,
Interesting.
panels for them. Yeah, it
You're
was
the
it was
go-to.
fun. Eventually, the whole dealing with a committee got to me, and I decided not to do that anymore because so many varied opinions on a committee, and
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
I don't,
it,
yeah, you can't weave or design by committee, I don't think. So,
yeah,
I mean,
it
you
was
can
difficult.
design, right? Yeah. So, so your experience with looms sort of spans big, small, rigid heddle, floor loom, giant shaft looms, it sounds like. So,
Yeah.
what do you go through phases where you prefer different looms at different times? Have you always had a favorite? Maybe just sort of talk about like the rigid heddle component because you like I think you're probably I mean, maybe of the teachers that I know, you're so you're very pro rigid heddle when, and kind of a lot of people aren't in
Yeah.
the weaving community. So that's one of the things that I found was so wonderful about you, and that you were like, hey, weaving is weaving, knock yourself out. It's great, whatever you have. So maybe you could just sort of talk about a little bit about like your experiences with the different types of looms and, you know, what you like, what you don't like, and where the pros and cons are.
Okay, well, when I was a production weaver. I mean, during the period that I was doing the liturgical weavings, I was also weaving. I sold to galleries, and I did maybe 4 or 5 retail shows a year where I sold garments, mostly garments and accessories.
Mhm.
I had 9 looms in my studio. The smallest was 20 inches wide. The biggest was 6 feet wide. That's where I did many of the
Wow.
liturgical pieces on it. It had 16 harnesses. So I ran the gamut of, and at that time during my journey of weaving, if you would have asked me about a rigid Heddle loom, I would have scoffed and said something like that I still hear occasionally. I'm a real weaver. I weave on real looms. Okay. And frankly, I had never tried a rigid Heddle loom. Okay, so what did I know? I just saw them, thought they looked like toys compared to my floor looms. But then along the way somewhere, I actually tried a rigid Heddle loom and fell in love with it because it was small. I could tote it around. I could sit on the couch with my loom on my lap and watch TV and weave. I mean, come on. It was so easy to warp compared to warping I would always plan 2 days to warp one of my big looms. And I'm fast because I have a lot of experience. So, 2 whole days just to warp one of the big ones. But I mean, again, I would put on 30 to 40 yard warps because I was doing production. Um, so going from that to warping up a rigid Heddle loom, which I can do in like 20 minutes, depending upon the length of the warp, it opened my eyes to the possibility, and also then teaching people, getting someone started by using a rigid Heddle loom that's so much easier and so much less complicated and time consuming than using a floor loom. It just like opened up a whole new world. And when Ashford came out with the knitter's loom, I mean, that's the model name of it,
Right.
they targeted knitters. I mean, that was the whole reason for that loom. You could fold it up. It came in a tote bag. You could schlep it around just like your knitting bag. You could use knitting, again, I'm using quotes, knitting yarns
Right.
to weave with. It created a whole new audience for people that thought they might like to weave. And so I became a real convert. And I've gone now from having 9 floor looms and no rigid Heddle looms. I have 1 floor loom, and I think I have 12 rigid Heddle looms.
Oh my God.
Now, the reason I have so many is because I teach, and now I teach a lot online, but I teach, and so it's my responsibility as a teacher to be familiar with every model of loom so that when somebody in class has a problem, I don't have to figure it out. I've used it, I've encountered that, so I can help them with it. That's what I hope.
Yeah, and I remember actually the week I spent with you at Convergence in Providence. It was all on it was on double weave. And I think you had said perhaps in some of the paperwork ahead of time, like, oh, they're going to be, I'm going to have a variety of different types of looms. And I think at that point I'd already bought a Cricut, and I was thinking about upgrading to a larger loom with 2 heddles. I'm like, Deborah, can I have can I try one of the shacked looms because I've already got, I'm already familiar with it. And you did. You brought an array of, I think of at least 2 or 3, at least Ashford Shacked, and I think there might have been another brand, maybe a Becca or something in there. But
I think
yeah,
a Glamacra.
yes, yes,
I
physical
used to
marker.
tote around Glamacras. Yeah,
That's right. That's right.
yeah.
Um, so let's see. So turning a little bit more into rigid Heddle and into this box specifically. First, I want to say this. So this is the third one we've done, and this I want to say was such an incredible project to photograph. The images came out beautifully. And I
Yes, they
remember
do.
going into it when we were talking about the project specifically, and I was like, okay, this is going to hang together really well because it's all table linens. Courses, it's been a mix and match, some linen, some shawls, some, which can set up some challenges, at least from my perspective, on like how to present it. Obviously, all table linens was really, really easy. And the color scheme, I remember thinking at the time, wow, this is like really earthy and neutral. I love neutrals, but it's like, it's so different from the kind of light pastel we did in January, and then the really bright springy colors in April. And wow, there was such an incredible wow factor in this project with just the way that you put the color palette together. It was fabulous. So I just want to say that to begin with. And then just sort of, I know that you really, you live in sort of in the Southwest, you really love those kinds of colors. What else was behind the inspiration of this particular collection? And like, what is it you wanted people to learn, to get out of it, get out of this collection?
Well, I mean, I still hear people that are uh, steadfast multi-shaft weavers
Mhm.
believe that rigid heddle looms are not real weaving, and that you can't do certain things on rigid heddle looms, like huck. You can't do huck on a rigid heddle loom. It's not the same thing. And frankly, I did a project for Handwoven a few years ago that Ashford. It was rigid heddle versus multi-shaft looms. Okay, kind of. It was featuring different looms, and so I did a project that I wove the same huck scarf on a rigid heddle loom, and then I wove it on an 8-shaft loom. It was an 8-shaft pattern.
Wow.
And so many people were amazed at that. And later I got feedback from some people like, well, you didn't really do the one on a rigid heddle loom. Well, yes, I did. And I did it in half the time
Mhm.
because the warping took such less time to do. I mean, I had my whole project finished in the amount of time that it took me to do the warping on the 8 harness loom. Okay. And so bearing that in mind, when we were talking about doing a box, I thought about using pickup sticks because we could do so many different patterns using pickup sticks that maybe multi-harness people and multi-harness people might see that you can do all of these really cool things on a rigid heddle loom, and the pickup sticks are really pretty easy to use. I mean, some people are intimidated by, I don't want to mess with all that moving sticks back and forth and whatever, but it's really easy. I mean, you get in a rhythm of inserting them, and some of them you can just leave in. And so I really just wanted to show how you could progress from the simple huck block in the napkins to the bigger huck box in the table runner and the Swedish lace. And yeah, this isn't so hard. And then go on to the honeycomb, which looks really complex, but it's not.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of moving your sticks around. So to me, it was a progression of skill level to show that, hey, this is really not very hard. It's pretty easy and it's not complicated to do.
Right. It's funny because I did a project for Little Looms recently that's not come out yet, but it was an adaptation. It was another, pickup stick project, and to do that on a shaft loom would have required 5 shafts and not 4. And so it's like, this is. And it's been interesting because we've had, since I've been here and working with you with the content and the patterns, more often than not, I sort of expect rigid heddles. I expect that once we publish a certain pattern, we'll get questions from rigid heddle weavers. I'm like, oh, can I do that on my rigid heddle loom? Actually, with us, it's been the other way around, where we've had shaft loom weavers ask us, like, can I do this on my shaft loom? I saw it on
Oh,
rigid heddle.
wow.
Yeah, which has been really kind of nice,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I've ended up taking some projects and adapting them for shaft loom weavers. And in some cases they don't come out exact, like it's not quite exact. It's really close, but sometimes it's not there entirely.
Yeah.
So are there any were there particular lessons or tips or anything about the projects that you discovered along the way that you would like to share, or things to look out for, just to keep in the back of, of weavers' minds as they're working on them?
One of the things that because I always sample, especially if I'm, writing a pattern or doing a project for a class or something, of course, I have to sample to make sure that I am getting the effect that I want. And one of the things that was really reinforced to me on these projects was that I want plain weave along the edges, because with these particular patterns, the some of the pickup techniques, or the huck, or the honeycomb or whatever, it sucks in the selvage a little, depending upon where the floats are. Yeah. And I don't want sometimes I might want a wavy selvage. That might be a cool thing that I'm looking for. But on these projects, like a placemat or a table runner, I did not want a wavy selvage. And so I made sure that I put plain weave on both sides. And my sampling really reinforced that for me. And especially with the honeycomb, because if you have the honeycomb all the way to the edges, you've got the big float going up around the edge of the cells. And then a float on the edge is not necessarily an endurable piece of fabric. It's going to get snagged or pulled out. So that was really something that I was reinforced to me, and I wanted to pass on, because I know a lot of times when people do projects like this, then they go on and interpret it in their own way and make their own design. And so that's why I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that plain weave along the edge is a good thing.
Yeah. And it's funny, it took me a really long time to figure that out, like to figure out how to do sort of the inset. I don't know why, but I couldn't. I remember doing a pattern, and it was selvage to selvage. And then somebody had taken that and done exactly what you did, right? Put a plain weave border around it. And it was like, how did she do that? So that was, yes, very key. Anna, any questions or anything from comments? Okay, good. Let's see, Deborah, what else was I going to ask you? Now, you've written a couple of books. One I think you published within the last 2 years or so, I think, with Ashford.
Yeah.
Anything you want to talk about there?
The first one was I wrote it with Gwen Steege, who was an editor at Story Books. And she was looking at retiring, and I was trying to get somebody to publish a rigid heddle book, learning rigid heddle weaving. I didn't have it written yet, of course, but I was, going around promoting the idea and talking to publishers. And they were already in progress with Sine Mitchell doing her book, Inventive Weaving on Little Looms, which is a great book. So they were already doing that one, and they didn't want to do a second rigid heddle book. But Gwen said, Gwen and I became friends, and we talked a lot. And she said, I've noticed that you do a lot of other things besides weaving. Have you ever thought about doing a book on, just a lot of different techniques that don't necessarily use a loom? And so that's how we came up with the book, The Weaving Explorer. We wrote it together. It's got, I think, 32 or 33 projects in it that we just kind of split up, and we would talk about them, but I did half and she did half, and it's really a fun book. I just taught a class on Saturday from one of the projects in the book, Needle Weave a Pendant Necklace. But it's got kumihimo and lucette, I think is how you say it. It's got all kinds of different projects in it. I always thought it would be a great book, like if you had a Girl Scout troop, or some sort of church group or something, that you wanted to do projects with young people. I used to do projects out of it when I taught things at summer camp, when I was at the studio. So it's a great. It's not rigid heddle weaving, but it's a lot of cool stuff.
You could take them elsewhere.
Yeah, that was my first effort at book. And then I still had this idea of doing the rigid heddle book, and I engaged with a publisher, signed a contract. We spent a couple of years working on it, and then they went out of business. And so it took me like another year to get the rights back. So then I was at a trade show. I was at TNNA, which was a yearly trade show for the yarn industry.
Mhm.
And Ashford was there. And I had dealt a lot with Ashford. I had taught for them at TNNA before and gone to conferences and represented them and things like that. And I was kind of whining into the two guys that own the company now, David and God, his name just went right out of my head.
James. I think it's James.
James, yeah, James and David. And I was saying, oh, my publisher went out of business and I've got this whole book written. And they're like, wait, you have a whole book written on rigid heddle weaving? And I'm like, yeah, it's completely done, but I need to find a publisher. And they're like, we've been wanting to publish a new book on rigid heddle weaving. So it was wonderful. We like the next week we signed a contract, and then Elizabeth Ashford did some editing because they wanted to add centimeters to all the things. And, we reviewed a bunch of stuff, and they published it. So I think it's been like 3 years it's been out.
Right.
So yeah, I couldn't be happier. Working with them has been wonderful.
Yeah,
So
they're lovely to work with. We've
they are,
done
yes.
quite a bit with them. We've sold a lot of their looms. And then let's see, you just came back from an incredible trip, Iceland, Ireland, and Amsterdam. Did you go to any, I don't know, weaving museums? Was there anything, was it a source of inspiration for what you might take to your loom next?
Well, traveling is always a source of inspiration. I have to admit, on this trip, many trips before, I've targeted weaving things. And before, when we were making plans for this trip, my husband said, I'd kind of like to do some things besides go look at weaving things. And so I didn't plan a single weaving thing on this, but always just traveling, and I take a lot of pictures of colorful things that I like, so I can go back and be inspired by shapes or colors, or just people's clothes that people have on, things like that. So it was a lovely trip, and we had been to the places in Ireland before, and I had gone to several weaving mills in around the towns that we were in. So I didn't feel too uncomfortable,
Right.
not doing specific weaving things on this trip.
What's on your loom now, or what's next on your loom if you don't have anything on a loom?
Well, I have a chenille warp on my floor loom to make some garments with. The guild that I belong to here in Arizona, we have a yearly sale in November that's just fabulous, and I'm hoping to get some chenille garments finished. That's what I used to specialize in, rayon chenille, when I was a production weaver, and that's always just makes such beautiful fabric. And frankly, I teach classes, and so I design projects, and so I always make the project or make 2 or 3 of the projects before I teach a class. And although I have 12 looms, I think 9 of them have things on them that I need to finish. And so that's because I get partway finished with the final one, and then I teach the class and I put the loom away. And anyway, so I've got crook brog on one. I've got pinwheels on another. I've got a chenille scarf on one rigid heddle loom. I can't even think what I've got on the rest of them. Oh, a Sakiori scarf. I took a class from Amanda Robinette, I think is her name, on Sakiori weaving. And yeah, so there's a lot of stuff I need to get busy on.
Great. Well, it sounds like you and I will have to have another conversation about some future projects going forward.
Sounds good.
So, all right.
And we do have one coming up, don't we? Don't we have a pattern coming up?
We actually, Wednesday, as a matter of fact, yes, the Twisted Shawl in Sero Silk Noil is just absolutely gorgeous. And this was one where I had toyed with the idea of like, oh, do I adapt this for shaft loom weaving, and decided at the last minute not to, just because it just wouldn't be. I don't know that it would make for actually an enjoyable shaft loom weaving experience, just because the floats are just on the very, very edge. But anyway, Wednesday. Stay tuned. It is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, gorgeous, and drapey. And yeah, I had such a good time working with Deborah on and working with you on this. So
That yarn is so beautiful. Yeah, loved it. So
yeah, I just rewove a scarf in it in a different colorway, and I just every time I do it, I've got like probably 6 scarves or shawls in silk no in Saro at this point, and it's just the drape is spectacular.
yeah,
I've never worked with anything like it. So
gorgeous.
uh,
Yeah,
thank you. Yes, so thank you for mentioning that. Yep, that will be coming out on Wednesday. So
good.
everybody stay tuned. Okay, Anna, if there's nothing from the audience, I think we'll call it a day and say thank you so much, Deborah, for the projects, for the time, for this lovely conversation this afternoon. And
Well, thank you.
yeah, we'll look
It's a
forward to.
pleasure. It's always a pleasure working with you. I love it. And I hope we do some more things in the future. So,
I think we will.
and thanks everybody for attention and Anna for being such a good hostess. So
All right.
thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.